Okay, I don't need all of these things open, but I do want to keep this one study open because it's kind of cool. And as you can imagine, a lot of the stuff that I was looking at was a little sussy, but this study was really freaking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I learned a lot from it. Okay, I'm gonna close this. Almost this entire, all of my tabs, they're going away. They're being deleted. Sussy Baka, exactly. I did. I said science. It was me. Oh my god. Just keeping, I'm allowing myself 2 tabs open, which is 200% less than normal. All right. Hello, my friends. I hope you're doing well. And Amy was pointing out that it was kind of hilarious that this was the subject this week because uh I have not slept in days. It's been terrible and bad, and I don't know what's happening, but it was fun to learn about it while I was suffering. So, um, originally the requested subject for this week was dreams, uh, which, while fascinating, not a whole lot going on in the molecular biology department on that one. Yeah, it's really rough, but you know, when you dig yourself this exact type of hole like multiple times in your life, you know eventually you're gonna get out of it. I know my way out. Well, I'm sure I'll be fine. Um, and it was just, yeah, obviously it was hilarious learning about this stuff, but yeah, dreams was the original sort of subject, like the physiology of dreams. And I am not an expert in psychology or neuroscience or neuroanatomy. I would say at least the last 3 I can rough and tumble, you know. I can do that stuff, but certainly not psychology. So I glued it together, and I put a my spin on it basically. So I will talk about dreams, and I will talk about sleep, but we will be talking about it within the context of a molecule, as it is Molecular Monday. And as you can see by the title, that molecule is going to be um, that one, acetylcholine. Or, if you're one of my professors in college, acetylcholine. Never in my life have I heard anyone pronounce it like that, so I just say acetylcholine. You will see it written as ACH. It's not, I mean, it's well known. I feel like even anyone who's not like, you know, neck deep in molecular biology has probably heard of this substance. It's really heavily implicated in certain neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. It's important for memory and wakefulness and regulating sleep, of course, as well as basically controls your skeletal muscles. It's a very cool guy. So this is gonna be our buddy for a little bit, and then I will be circling back to sleep and dreams and what this molecule has to do with it. It's gonna be absolutely wonderful, absolutely massive. So, as with the human body, there's a lot going on when it comes to sleep. There are a lot of different neurotransmitters, a lot of different chemicals in your brain going all different directions. Sometimes the specific direction is important when it comes to its function. There are different areas of the brain that are involved, each containing their own specific types of neurochemicals. There are a lot of conflicting theories also about sleep mechanisms, and especially dream mechanisms, as you can imagine. I know. I think Freud wrote a book. He wrote like the interpretation of dreams in like the late 1890s or something, and I'm pretty sure everyone now is like, no, we don't need that. We don't need that shit. We absolutely adore science and brains. It is the best. Um, but yeah, due to all of those parameters, that's what makes sleeping and dreams so complicated and so fascinating. So today I'm just gonna break it down, and we just care about acetylcholine today and its role in this process. Um, I'm thinking, I mean, because of all the molecules involved, I could definitely talk about. I could go back to dopamine. I could talk about dopamine in sleep. I could talk about weed in sleep. I could talk about serotonin in sleep. I mean, there's just so many layers. But today it is acetylcholine. So the main role of this guy, like just the overarching thing, is he's a communicator. Myself and my involvement in the uh, mechanism of every single human's sleep. I'm very involved. um, I knew at one point I would have to revisit dopamine. I mean, come on. Um, it is it's a neurotransmitter, meaning that it is not in your blood. It is pretty much just in your neurons, except when we get to this one really, really special place, of course. There's always a caveat. But it's in your brain. It helps one area of your brain communicate with another area of your brain. Um, it also goes beyond your central nervous system. It goes not just in your brain and spinal cord, but it communicates with all of the fibers that are going to your vital organs. So that's going to be the autonomic nervous system.
Wow.
Yeah, dopamine be fucking with a lot of people's brains. It's like kind of fucked up. I take personal responsibility for all of mental illness. Oh my god. Um, that picture sucks, by the way. The autonomic nervous. You'll see a blown up version of it. Don't you worry your little dopamine depleted brain about that. But yeah, very important uh, communicator between the big guy and all of your peripheral nerves. Uh, and lastly, more specifically, between your brain and your skeletal muscles. The reason that you can move and like throw things and like JO and all of those things is all because of acetylcholine coming from your central nervous system, going down your peripheral nerves, touching your muscles, and telling them to get a move on. It is good shit. So that is the first thing that we're going to talk about. Why you move. Um, Peripheral nervous system, obviously everything that's not your brain and spinal cord. All those nerves kind of go and they dip their fingies into every other aspect of your body, pretty much. Right now, we're concerned about the ones that are touching your skeletal muscles. So that's any of the muscle. I mean, I guess it's kind of in the name, but it's the muscles that are attached to your skeleton, the ones that help you move. So that would be, we're not talking about like your heart muscle, for example, or any smooth muscle right now, just your skeletal muscle. And they are innervated by motor neurons that come from your spine. So motor neurons bring an impulse from your central nervous system to your bicep or your mouth or wherever. Um, this is what's going on at that level right now. So there's a place. Is it gonna let me draw? Will it let me draw? It doesn't want to let me draw. That's so BS. I'll force it. There we go. This little area right here, very tiny. This nerve, this is a motor neuron. It touches a muscle fiber, and a very classic sort of structure in the nervous system is the synapse, of course, where you see like the two different neurons, and there's neurotransmitters being released between them, and they're communicating with each other. The NMJ, the neuromuscular junction, is just a modified version of that. Instead of two neurons, it's a neuron on a muscle fiber. So basically, what happens is you have an impulse in your brain, like maybe you want to reach out to something. in order to activate the muscles that are going to allow you to do that, your brain is going to generate something called an action potential. Now, an action potential is, and it's an electrical impulse that you are making in your brain because of a motivation or because of anything. When that gets generated, it's going to travel down these motor neurons, and the reason why it continues to travel is because it's changing the electrical current and the electrochemical environment of those neurons as it travels. So that makes it so that it can keep going, keep going, keep going until it reaches this neuromuscular junction. At this point, in these nerve terminals, these red circles right here, that's going to be our acetylcholine. The acetylcholine it's being stored right now. It's in little vesicles. It's hanging out at the terminal of the neuron. And when the action potential reaches that area, again, it's going to change that electrical environment. I wish I had my picture that I used to have, but all of our cell membranes have this sort of resting potential. So basically the inside of the cell at resting potential is going to be slightly more negative. And when an action potential reaches an area like this where there's a lot of neurotransmitters, it's going to make that membrane potential a lot more positive than it was before. A crap ton more positive by opening calcium channels that are going to allow calcium to flow into the nerve terminal. All right, so here's where we are. Acetylcholine is just chilling right now. There wasn't anything going on, but now that there's a crap ton of calcium and a crap ton of this positive charge, the calcium is basically going to like break the vesicles connection. It's going to pop the vesicles connection with the cell membrane, and as a result, the acetylcholine is going to be pushed out of the neuron into that space between the neuron and the muscle cell, the neuromuscular junction. Yeah, someone should find that. Yeah. Oh yeah, I am so fueled by the cheering. All right.
I have it.
You do? Hell yeah.
The monkey.
Give us.
I don't think I can put it in the chat.
Oh. We'll figure out a way. Amy will find a way to give us the monkey video game. All right, so as a result of that electrical change where we have like a crap ton of positive charge within the neuron, the acetylcholine gets pushed out into that NMJ. What happens next is the acetylcholine is going to bind its receptor, right here, denoted, on the muscle fiber. So what we're witnessing here is the translation between a thought, an impulse, to electrical impulse, to what's going to eventually be a muscle contraction. Okay, now I have to see it. I love it. I'm in love with it. Oh my god. All right. Now what's going to happen, now that acetylcholine is released and it has access to its receptor on the muscle cell, it's going to bind its receptor, and oh my god, guess what? Those receptors are also ion channels. So again, we're going to propagate this signal by just changing the electrochemical environment at the muscle cell. So when the acetylcholine binds, it activates a channel that's permeable to sodium and also potassium. Fun fact, important note, we have a lot more sodium outside versus inside the cell, but we have a lot more potassium inside versus outside. Now, it's important for us to know because this is a way for us to kind of keep our charges balanced. And you're going to see later, it's also important for the direction of ion flow is important for a lot of physiological processes. And what we see here is, despite these swapping basically of the potassium and the sodium, you are still perpetuating this positive charge onto the muscle, which is leading again to a crap ton of calcium being released within the cell. And then the calcium is then going to go on and, do things to create the actual muscle contraction itself. But it is the acetylcholine that has mediated this process in the first place. It is so gosh darn cool. And of course, we love understanding things and learning about things that are complicated. And the best way to truly, truly, truly understand those things is to mess it up and make disease happen. Can confirm that is Yaman playing video games, but you know what? It's all right. It's me playing video games too. It's all of us playing video games. Sometimes I'll just, sit at my computer and I just look like that, but the game's not on. Science, explain. America, explain. All right, so botulism. It's caused by the botulinum toxin, aka Botox, which is, famous for. It's used for a lot of other things, as we'll see, but it's used for sort of eliminating wrinkles, usually in your forehead. That's usually where the comedy comes, where given protagonist gets injection in forehead or mouth and then can't drink water. But it comes from bacteria originally. And what happens if you have botulism is the toxin is going to inhibit the release of acetylcholine from those nerve terminals that we were just looking at. So it's going to make it so that the proteins holding the acetylcholine vesicles can't release it. That's the level at which the inhibition occurs. And as a result, you get this what's called flaccid paralysis, which is where it's very low muscle tone, as opposed to like other types of paralysis where you're like really, really tense. This is just like you cannot move your muscle. It doesn't matter how many signals you're trying to send to your hand to move. If there's an inhibition in this acetylcholine release, the message is not going to get to your muscles. And we're actually going to come back to the botulinum toxin when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, which is right now. So it looks really complicated, and it is, but it's not. We have two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic is the fight or flight one. That, of course, is heavily associated with like adrenaline and mobilizing yourself for, some sort of survival event. Of course, it's not just active during those times. It's not only active when you're being chased by a lion. It's active right now. It's, regulating your heartbeat and regulating a lot of other vital organs. But its main sort of function is to mobilize your body for action. And that could be increasing your heart rate to get more blood pumping, dilating your airways so that you could take bigger breaths and get more oxygen. It constricts your GI organs because you're wanting to use the energy that you have for, whatever it is, like running or things that are fight or flight response like. So we're not really spending time digesting our food. We've got other more important things to do. Dilating your pupils, I believe, helps with far away vision. Dilating blood vessels to your muscles, of course. You need oxygen and blood flow to be given to your muscles if you're going to do something extremely physical. And it activates your sweat glands. The micro truly. It it really is. That's like a really good way to put it. And I think that uh as someone who doesn't always understand a lot about like electronics and computer, when I see them compared to each other, it's like, oh my, for real though, like our nervous system is like, it's a computer, it's a microprocessor. It's like, I love that. I love bridging those gaps because on the outset they're very very different subjects, but are they? um, so and then the sympathetic you can see it's very thin, but you could see in red. So for example, um, in this thoracic area, we see nerves that are going to the heart and to the lungs and the larynx. It really is. I feel like that's like all these other like AI applications. We're trying to pretend like we're not totally just trying to like reconstruct a human, um, and we're a little too close for comfort. It kind of scares me, but it's also really really cool. Um, and I feel like these exact things that I'm talking about, like these um, sort of the types of connections here, can easily be simulated. Um, so you'll also notice before I go into parasympathetic, I just want to point out, don't be weirded out by this being separate. That tripped me up for a sec. It's still just the spine. I don't know why they. It's fine. The nerves that are coming from the spine in the autonomic nervous system, a lot of them you'll notice are synapsing or connecting in these little circle areas, which represent ganglia. Ganglia are groups of neurons outside of the central nervous system. And why that's important is because that's mostly where we're going to see our acetylcholine. Just prepping you, the ganglia. Uh, but first, I'll quickly go over just the parasympathetic, which is it's like it's basically the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. We say rest and digest or feed and breed. I don't like that second one. I like rest and digest way better. um, and they sort of counteract each other. You, I'm trying to find the blue is the parasympathetic, so you can see these connections that are coming from. This is actually the brainstem up here. It's not just the spine. We have the brainstem that's going down, and it's going all up in the stomach and the liver and these digestive areas, and in the heart. So this is where the parasympathetic and the sympathetic sort of regulate each other in that way. And so, and here are some of the opposite actions. So we stimulate the digestive organs with the parasympathetic. We increase salivation and other like sort of unconscious tasks that we just need to do, like urination, airway constriction, and then general vasodilation. So that's different from the parasympathetic where you just see it in the skeletal muscles. In the parasympathetic, you're opening it up to other areas of your body as a way to help, rest, or, that's just what they need. And then, yeah, pupil constriction, which is near sight. Now, where does acetylcholine fit into all of this? All of these ganglia right here, whenever we have a nerve going from in the autonomic nervous system, sort of going out of the brainstem or the spinal cord and synapsing onto one of these, the neuron going into it, so from the spine to the ganglia, is using acetylcholine in both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. So much like with muscles, the ones that synapse directly on muscle cells, these ones that are going out of the brain and out of like the central like processing area of our body out into the periphery, some of these, before they even touch the organ that they're going to, they'll synapse on one of these ganglia, and it's the acetylcholine that's going to give the sort of signal that, all right, let's go from Where's the vagus nerve? Oh, the vagus nerve is not a good example. It does not have a ganglia. I chose the one that does not have a ganglia. Okay, I'm a liar. But let's, oh, ciliary, easy. This nerve that is going to the ciliary ganglia is eventually going to go to your eye. And here, there's blue, we have the parasympathetic input. So if we're gonna constrict if our pupils are gonna constrict for whatever reason, acetylcholine being released here is what's gonna be delivering that signal. In the tissues, it may or may not be acetylcholine. That kind of depends. But in all of these, the intermediary is gonna be frickin' acetylcholine, that frickin' guy. So yeah, see, like I said, the sympathetic nerves, they use like epinephrine and norepinephrine, except for the sweat glands. For some reason, the sympathetic input to the sweat glands uses acetylcholine. But then for all of these blue end connections right here, that is going to be acetylcholine. It's freaking everywhere. It's everywhere, trying to help coordinate all of these like really important functions that our body needs to do. Once again, though, Botox. It doesn't just treat wrinkles or even like disorders of like muscle rigidity and stuff like that. It can also treat excessive sweating. Because remember, the sympathetic inputs to our organs, even though almost all of them use adrenaline and noradrenaline, that one for some reason uses acetylcholine. So people who have issues with excessive sweating can utilize this botulinum toxin in order to inhibit the release of acetylcholine there, thus decreasing the activation to the sweat glands. The more you know. I did not know about that. I knew a lot. Botulinum toxin is a really good example of like how these exogenous agents can affect communication within our body. I had no idea about the sweat gland thing, so that was really cool. All right, so that was the autonomic nervous system. Now, I gotta tell you, before we go on to the last little function, molecules, man. I love molecules. Receptors are molecules too. And there are multiple really cool receptors for acetylcholine. I'm not going to go into the subtypes. I promise. I promise I won't do that. But I want to go into the two main guys. The first one being the nicotinic cholinergic receptor. It is called that because nicotine activates it. And we call it that not... It activates this cholinergic receptor, but not the other. So, due to the fact that that was really central to its discovery, congratulations, nicotine. So this is an ion channel. This is actually the ion channel that you saw on the muscle fiber at the neuromuscular junction. This is what acetylcholine will bind on muscle fibers in order to get sodium into the cell and potassium out to change the electrochemical environment. There are technically two types. That would be the muscular type. There's also the neuronal type, which through similar sort of charge and electric mechanisms will affect the release of different neurotransmitters. But the one that you saw is the muscular type. The next one is the muscarinic cholinergic receptor, named because it binds muscarine. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Which is a substance in a lot of different mushrooms. I think in low amounts, it's totally fine. I don't know if it's in like super regular mushrooms that you get at the supermarket. I know that there's a little bit of them in those like Amanita ones, but I don't think in regular mushrooms there's like a danger of overdosing on the muscarine. But as you'll kind of see, a lot of it would be dangerous due to the repercussions on things like muscles and memory and things like that. So as you can see, this one looks this one looks really, really different. That's because it's not even an ion channel. It's just not even that. It's completely different. It is a G protein coupled receptor that has, this is the one that has like quite a few subtypes. And they are either more in your brain or more in the periphery, in other parts of the nervous system. One example of one of the types is ones that what is it called? They're called GQ. And specifically, this one will slow your heart rate by activating calcium channel or potassium channels. And remember that potassium, there's a lot inside versus outside, and by the rules of diffusion, substances want to go to where there's less of them. So this is going to cause that positive charge to move out of the cell. And as a result, you're making the membrane potential more negative, maybe more to normal, maybe even more negative than normal. You're hyperpolarizing it. You're making it so that other action potentials are going to have a harder time activating it. And as a result, the heart muscle is going to contract a lot slower. The other type is the one that's more centrally located in your brain, and it has a role in perception, attention, cognitive function, memory consolidation, and sleep cycles, which is what we are gonna go into. I'll make sure I set all the information. Ah, yes. Okay, so we're good. We're good. All right. Yes, here we go. Sleep. It is sleep time. So there are two types of sleep. The one that I'm going to focus on today is going to be mostly REM sleep. Not because you only dream in REM sleep, because you can dream in the other stages, but because acetylcholine is really, really, really involved with REM sleep. So, CORE stands for rapid eye movement. There's a lot of acetylcholine being released in your brain during this time, and not a lot of other things that are normally present in your brain when you're awake, like serotonin and noradrenaline. Those are the monoamines, actually. It is very similar to being awake, like the electric readouts that scientists get from the brains of people in REM sleep is comparable to waking states. And you're also super paralyzed during REM sleep, which is important if you dream a lot during REM sleep, because you don't want to get up and act those out. So your body paralyzes you. It's also associated with more vivid dreams, more dreams that involve like really weird stuff where you're like, I have a fish in my hand, but I know it's my water bottle. Like weird stuff like that. Those sorts of that sort of content tends to be from more the REM dreams, which we can contrast with the NREM dreams. Those tend to be more, not like, I don't want to say normal, but just like if you're the kind of person who has dreams that are just like you went to the store and you like shopped around and then you went home and then you woke up, that's like boring. That's normal. Usually those tend to be more of the NREM dreams. There are 3 stages. There's like a light, and then you get down to like the stage 3, which is the deeper sleep. People who are woken up, like in studies, people who are woken up while they're in like certain stages of NREM report that they were thinking but not really dreaming. There's also floppy airway. Floppy airway. This is great. So you are slightly less paralyzed during NREM, even though it's your deeper sleep. Sometimes, if you're in stage 3, your body is not as paralyzed as it is during REM sleep. Um, and what happens is there's still there's still areas of muscle that are sort of inhibited. So, like, oh, what's it called? Your the muscles around your airway kind of collapse a little bit. Some of the muscles in your chest, but then not your diaphragm. This is so weird. I think this is like the scientific term is just called floppy airway. I love that. So your diaphragm is just like a freaking like circle that just is all the way around below your lungs. And of course, when you're breathing, when it gets bigger is when you're breathing in, and when it constricts, you are breathing out. Uh, and it's very dependent on these pressure differentials. And so if your muscles are weakened while you're sleeping, but not your diaphragm, then you still can have these like pretty decently sized breaths going in and out despite your floppy airway, which is why people snore, or it's why even if they're not really snoring, you can kind of hear like a not like that, not like that, but like people make a lot of noise when they're in deep sleep, and it's because their airway is floppy, despite the fact that their diaphragm is still like I'm good. So that's weird and gross. Um, on the left, so these are sleep cycles that we're looking at, right? So you don't just go one and then the other and then you're just done sleeping. You know, you cycle through them. So you start in the first stage of NREM, which is light sleep. You go to 2 and then 3. 3 is deep sleep. 4 does not exist anymore. Scientists decided that it does not exist, so I deleted it. So you just are basically going to go from deep sleep back to like the middle ground, and then that's normally when you're going to enter REM sleep. And after REM is when you can either briefly wake up and go back to light sleep, or you just cycle back to the middle stage. I kind of have that right here. This is a readout. This is from my Fitbit from like a couple months ago. I just chose one where I had like pretty normal, like my order of going through the stages and my length. So you tend not to have REM at the beginning of your sleep. You go into light and then deep, and see I'm cycling between the two of them, and then I go into a REM sleep, and I sort of do even more of these little cycles. I guess I woke up a little bit, and then I have a REM and then a light right before I wake up. So it's normal to kind of like ping pong ping pong between these different sleep stages. And they're both very important for very different reasons. Like I said, I'm going to focus on REM sleep today. I'm going to focus on why the type of memory consolidation that REM is important for, and acetylcholine's role in that. But you can still dream in MREM, and there are still some very interesting memory consolidation things that go on in those stages of sleep. But we are REM AF up in here. Just gonna take a little sippy of water before I go into the neuroanatomy of sleeping and dreaming. At the end of this, which this one is not as, I think is probably going to be one of the shorter of my lectures, just because it's it was more difficult to find reliable sources about the more like hot ticket like sleep and dream stuff. So I actually had to cut it a little bit, but in any case, at the end, I'm very interested in your weird dreams or instances of sleepwalking or sleep talking. I the sleepwalking kind of thing, I am gonna go into a little tiny bit. That's always very interesting, but I want to hear that shit. Okay. It's time to look at the brain. Ah, so beautiful. So disgusting. So complicated. So lovely. Um so these are the areas that we care about. Our head meat is very it's very swirly and scraggly and waggly, and I love it. This is just a little aside. I watched the original Frankenstein movie with my dad this weekend, and there's a scene where they like, oops, they dropped the good brain on the ground, and it like bounces. And I'm like, I like that actually, because if that were like a real brain, it would just, your brain is squish. It's just, it would flatten, and that would be so goddamn disgusting. No winkles for you. Amy got no winkles. Science.
No, my brain is cute.
Your brain is cute. Your brain changes color with your hair. All right. So the areas that we care about here. The first one is going to be the pons. It is in the brainstem, and the brainstem in general is associated with a lot of like really automatic things like breathing and stuff like that. The pons is going to be where everything begins for REM sleep. Next, the basal forebrain is going to be the first area that really communicates with the pons. It's also an area where we have a lot of cholinergic neurons, or neurons that release and respond to acetylcholine. That's going to be kind of our hub. What am I trying to say? It's like an integrating center, because once the signal reaches this area, that's when it's going to go to a lot of different areas. The basal forebrain is going to spread that shit. One of the places is going to be the neocortex. It's the cortex. It's the meat and potatoes of the brain. We put neo in front of it because I believe that the human brain is technically different from like other primates. I think certain primates don't have a neocortex, and it really just has to do with the layers of the brain, and not like an area itself. Wait, which part?
The neocortex.
It hates bandicoots.
Yeah. Do you know what we're doing here?
Crash Bandicoot?
Yes.
I didn't play that game.
The guy with the big N on his head.
Is that his name, Neocortex? I had no idea. That's amazing. That's hilarious. It's confusing to read about in a lot of literature, because most people will just say cortex, but if you need to specify that it's like the new and improved, really important one, you say neocortex. That's really funny. So the neocortex, the cortex, it's like the more outer parts of our brain that are involved in like crazy shit, like our perceptions and like stuff like that. That, as we're gonna see when we talk briefly about the hippocampus, there's a ping pong tennis interplay between the neocortex and the hippocampus that acetylcholine heavily controls. But in any case, the hippocampus is involved in memory consolidation, not memory storage. That's important. The hippocampus memories are not stored there. It is just really involved in encoding memories and like maybe strengthening or weakening memory traces, And even then, it's certain types of memory during REM sleep, and not all memories that the hippocampus will be involved in. Lastly, I mentioned the amygdala here. I don't go into the specifics with it, but there is an important sort of interplay with the amygdala in the system, because a lot of dreams can be very fearful, um, or they can be sexual, and this has to do with, especially the fear part has to do with the amygdala, and then the limbic system, your emotional system as a whole, has to do with the more emotional content of the dreams that we see during REM sleep. Um, and oh yeah, I did make a note. There is no serotonin or norepinephrine, basically, in these areas of your brain during REM sleep, which is sort of what makes it different from the waking states. Because again, REM sleep is so similar to our brain on REM is so similar to our brain on awake, and one of the big differences is the fact that there's just none of these monoamines during REM sleep. Um, it's very cool. So the basal forebrain is like I said, it's kind of a hub, not just because the pons is basically initiating REM sleep and trying to communicate with the basal forebrain at the initiation of REM, but because there's just a crap ton of acetylcholine neurons there, cholinergic neurons there. And another sort of thing that distinguishes waking states from REM sleep is,
oh, I love it.
oh, I love it. I'm never gonna turn those sounds loud, even though they blast my face off. Hello, Cosmic Horizon Studios. Welcome to Science, and thanks for the follow. Yeah, another thing that distinguishes waking states from REM is the fact that in the basal forebrain, it's not just these cholinergic neurons. It's like a crap ton of other ones that all release other neurotransmitters like glutamate or GABA that all regulate the activity in that area. So despite the fact that we have such high acetylcholine activity when we're awake and when we're in REM sleep, these are things that sort of regulate the other things going on in our brain to distinguish them. Oh yeah, and there was something I read. The general like flow of communication that is going on in your brain during REM. Another thing that's different is it looks like, I was reading that there's less synchronization between communication in the back and front of your brain. Like when you're awake, there's a lot of that going on, but I guess when you enter REM sleep, it's not as in sync, and it's thought that that is what can contribute to the sort of chaos that we remember and experience in our REM sleep dreams. Just a thought, just interesting. Wait a second. Should probably talk about how REM sleep is initiated. I mentioned it, but I want to give you the pathway. It starts in the pons. It starts in this area of the brainstem that connects to the basal forebrain via cholinergic neurons, and this action down here is what stimulates this brain-wide change that distinguishes it from wakefulness and NREM. And it's the activation of the basal forebrain, which, like I said, goes to a lot of other areas of the brain, and these aren't just like one-way connections either. These can communicate back and forth with each other, and the result of all of this electrical activity and all of this memory consolidation, it doesn't make absolutely no sense that we wouldn't have sort of imagery in our brains while we're asleep. Um, so the characteristic things about REM, we'll start with rapid eye movement. That's what it's called. Uh, there's an area in the pons in the brainstem. I love the categorization of the pons called the tectum. The tectum, yes, and it sends information. It's like right here somewhere, but like on the inside, it sends information to the tectum, and in that area are these things called the superior colliculi. Those guys are involved in visual tracking. So during REM sleep, despite the fact that a lot of your muscles are kind of paralyzed at this point, for whatever reason, our brain is totally fine just sending signals to this area of the brainstem that sort of controls our eye movement. And we think that that's why dreaming is so heavily associated with REM. I mean, our eyes are tracking actively the images that we might be seeing. Fascinating. The other thing, in addition to the rapid eye movement, is the paralysis. So the medulla right here has neurons that will go down to the spinal cord and then out to our skeletal muscles to communicate and say, don't move. We are in REM sleep. Don't do jack shit. So as you can imagine, anyone who has maybe lesions in these areas are going to experience something called REM atonia. A meaning without, tonia referring to muscle tone, which is where people will get up and act out things that are happening in their sleep, because their body eliminating this sort of break during REM sleep is just going to make it so that whatever motivating behaviors are causing your dream to happen are going to cause you to then physically act them out. And I think I've seen scientists call it's not acting out your dream, but it's dreaming out what you're acting. But that's terrifying and dangerous. So how nice of our body to give us this little break on our muscle system while we're dreaming. Okay, here we go. So this I think was one of the more fascinating things to me that I encountered during my research. So let's start, like, don't worry. We'll start over here. We're gonna look at being awake. So while you're awake, you are going about your day. You're acquiring new memories. You are learning things. You are acquiring information. And while you are acquiring them, your brain is actively consolidating and like organizing all of that. So that's what the sensory input is referring to. Is you're awake and you're interacting with your environment, and you have all of these sensory inputs into your brain. And because you're awake, you have a high amount of acetylcholine in your neocortex, which again is the outer layer that is involved in those more abstract cognitive functions. With high acetylcholine, the neocortex is allowed to easily communicate with the hippocampus. This right here is the hippocampus. This stands for entorhinal cortex, which is just something that connects the hippocampus with other areas of your brain. We got dentate gyrus, CA3, and CA1. These are just areas of the hippocampus that were just specified in the study. But this whole thing right here, there's no way I can write. I'm not good at writing with the mouse, but that's just your hippocampus. So the neocortex is allowed to send like crap tons of information to the hippocampus. Like, here, consolidate this, mother effer. Like, just figure this out and encode this, blah, blah, blah. The other way around is not as open. The hippocampus is not able to send its own information back to the neocortex. Now, I thought about why that would be, and I'm sure to a cognitive scientist or like a neuroanatomist or even a psychologist, the answer would be really easy. Uh, for me, it's not. All my brain says is, yeah, the high acetylcholine is having an inhibitory effect on the neurons there. But I wanna like try and ballpark this to sort of equate more to what's happening in real life. So if the hippocampus is so important in not storing our memories, but putting them in these nice little packages, um, then I would imagine that maybe having this sort of having this be a two-way street while you're awake, I wonder if there's such thing as like sending these memory traces or these like prematurely encoded things to your neocortex when they're not ready. I don't know if that would be a thing. That I was just trying to like figure out like why we would have the mechanism be like that. Anyway, slow wave sleep. That is the deepest possible NREM sleep. It's stage 3. Um, Here, you don't have sensory input because you are asleep. And during this stage, our acetylcholine goes down a crap ton. We have very, very minimal acetylcholine. Hi. I have to repeat it every time. um, when we have the low acetylcholine, like what was it doing before? It was inhibiting this direction, but now we don't have that inhibition. So the hippocampus can now freely send its information to the neocortex, and still the neocortex is allowed to continue sending its information. So now we have this sort of bidirectional communication going on, and my understanding is that I actually left this study open because some of the sentences I wanted to like read at the end of this, but the study was so good. It's the one that I got this graphic from. It was like, oh, during the day we're kind of like let the hippocampus like do its job, conserve its little energy. It's a very small little thing. Let it do its thing. And then during this deep sleep, it can send the memories that have been encoded completely to be stored somewhere. And then continuing to have the neocortex communicate with it, uh, potentially. I mean, these two areas of the brain are involved in different types of memory. So it's possible that the neocortex is feeding this information to the hippocampus that has more context, if that makes sense. Like, because it's on the outside of your brain and it's involved in these more like personal, perspective, abstract things, those are the types of things that it can be feeding to the hippocampus to incorporate into its encoding. Wow, this is so freaking abstract. It's like so cool. I always look like I'm mad, but I'm not. It's just so cool. um, and this study found that declarative memory was uh, heavily dependent on this slow wave sleep. So what declarative memory? It's also called explicit memory. That's like factual information. PO Box 2904, Toluca Lake, California 91610-0904. That's declarative memory. P Sherman 42 Wallaby, like facts. Like what was my old phone number and stuff like that. That stuff is heavily dependent on slow wave sleep. So we can kind of concur that that sort of it's a type of long-term memory, I should say. That type of long-term memory is dependent on these two parts of our brain having this like mutual communication between each other. All right, finally, here's REM. REM. Again, we're asleep, we don't have any sensory input. And we're having that high ACH again, which means that this is turning into this again. We're having like very minimal communication coming from the hippocampus and going into the neocortex, but again, still the neocortex gets to talk to the hippocampus. So it was found that this sort of because let's look at the difference between this and waking. The big thing is we have no sensory input. We have none of that. And yet we still have this sort of communication going on. So it was sort of concluded that okay, we're looking at a different type of memory consolidation here. We're looking more at procedural memory, which is another type of long-term memory that has to do with like unconscious tasks, like like how you write with a pencil and then you automatically erase, like stuff like things that are so just you don't need to learn them again, and like you're there. Like maybe muscle memory solving a Rubik's cube, or walking, like that all takes procedural memory. Um, Obviously incredibly important part of memory consolidation, and that was one of the differences that we found between this um, dream heavy REM sleep and this more slow wave sleep. Um, and I feel like we are kind of seeing a theme here because procedural memory, I feel, can involve, I mean, even the examples I gave, walking and writing with a pencil and using the eraser like it's second nature. Like those are very specific, and they're very like tailored to a specific person possibly, whereas like uh I don't know. I'm personally I'm still trying to like make sense of the roles of like memory consolidation when it comes to the stages of sleep, but almost felt like I was just kind of seeing a theme when it came to like the chaos of REM sleep and the type of memory. Maybe I'm just trying to make connections where there are none. But it is very interesting. This was probably the best study that I read because it really definitively went into like, yeah, so people who like we woke them up during slow wave sleep, they were really good still at like declarative memory tasks. And when we gave them like too much acetylcholine and made it so that they didn't get a lot of slow wave sleep, they were shit at these declarative memories tasks. It's so fucking cool. All right, so dreams. Let's go a little bit into dreams. It's a very, like I said in the beginning, there are a lot of like theories that are kind of conflicting with each other. So the ones that I'm going to talk about are ones that are more widely accepted. Um, but these arrows, these are super approximate, but you know, we're always starting in the pons, and then we have this wave of activation that eventually pretty much goes throughout our entire brain. And as I said, these are very similar. We see very similar activity to REM and waking states, but we also see these like connections and these communications going on are the inverse of NREM sleep. So, an example, I might go into it later, but I don't remember. An example of that would be like the limbic system. That's your the emotional like center in your brain, right? Uh, that tends to be pretty active, like really active during REM sleep, and that's why you have like these dreams that are very emotional or very scary or very sexual, things like that. But then in NREM, I don't think the limbic system is really active at all, and so you just get those like I'm walking my dog and that's my dream, that kind of stuff. So you can see the differences right there. You know, neuroscience. Okay, but one of the leading sort of ideas about how dreams come about has to do with the activation synthesis model. Um, so as I said before, the acetylcholine it starts in the pons, goes to the basal forebrain, travels to other parts of the cortex, and when that's going on, when you have those acetylcholine activating your basal forebrain and it's communicating with other parts of your cortex, that's where we think the dream images are kind of coming from. It makes sense because, like I said, those parts of your brain are uh, the part of your brain that like can. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to avoid using the word imagine because I'm trying to use like a waking state term. Well, the part of your brain that frickin' thinks, basically, is gonna attach images to it because of the activation of these specific, like, really high level brain areas. Um, and according to this model, like, scientists think that it's your forebrain attempting to make sense of this random activation from the pons that's so similar to being awake despite not being awake. I mean, I don't contest this at all. I'm not reacting like this because I'm like I don't believe it. I'm just like it's unbelievable to me. It's like ah, it's and this is just the activation synthesis model because even though I don't want to talk about dopamine in depth, there is an aspect of this that has to do with dopamine and it kind of makes things a little crazy. Um because here's the thing. Way back to my dopamine lecture, that we have dopamine pathways. We have dopamine pathways that are like it's a like where we've been looking at is right here, like maybe the dopamine ones like start like right here. They also start in the freaking brainstem is what I'm trying to say. They're like next to each other basically. Um and it seems like uh I mean dopamine pathways get activated when when we're motivated to do something like I want a drink of water or I want to go away from this person. Like anything like that. And there are hypotheses out there about what is it? Your brain, a motivational component getting activated in your brain, aka utilizing these dopamine pathways, but you're asleep. So instead, your brain plays out the action rather than doing it. I mean, it's so crazy to me. There's so much. And when I did my dopamine lecture, I knew that dopamine had some sort of role maybe in like the sleep wake cycles. I don't fucking know. It's a neurotransmitter. They all do something fucking they all have some sort of function that relates to how we live as humans. I had no idea it that dopamine really like actually might play a role in dreams and that there was a motivational component to dreaming. It's so it was very cool. It was very surprising to me to read about that. Um and damage to those dopamine pathways, mainly the let's see, the mesocortical and the mesolimbic, just like here, yeah, eliminates dreaming. It's gone. No dreaming. I think this is simulated by a lot of antipsychotics that significantly decrease dopamine in the dopamine system, and people on those drugs report having a lot less or straight up no dreams. It's nuts. And I think there have been other simulations on like people really want to divorce the concept of dreaming from REM sleep because you do dream in other stages and you can't simulate that by hurting the pons. No. The pons is protected forever. We love the pons. You will just die. You got a lot of important stuff there. But you could simulate the elimination of dreaming by killing oh whoa. What just happened? By killing like putting lesions on other areas of the brain. And I believe that they've done that. I don't remember the exact areas, but it's like other areas in the cortex, maybe the basal forebrain, where people don't dream, but they still have REM sleep. I don't think that the opposite has been accomplished. because again, it's dangerous to try to just like make lesions on your brainstem. You might die. um it's fucking nuts. It's so cool. I had no idea about a lot of this stuff. um oh yeah, this is actually what I was talking about with the dopamine, is this like the goal directed behavior that you have during the day. Because you're awake, you can just like, you can carry it out. But if you're sleeping, you can't, because you don't have, you're paralyzed in REM sleep. So instead, the activation, instead of going to these motor areas, it goes, yep, let's go to this completely different area in the cortex, maybe some perceptual areas. And now that's when the motivated behaviors are acted out in our minds and imagined instead of actually carried out. Literally brain go burr. Like, I literally brain go burr. Brain just do. It just, again, this is not frustration or hatred. It's just like I'm overwhelmed by how cool. Ah. Oh yeah, and there's the limbic system: emotion, fear, sex, and a lot of those feelings and experiences will get incorporated into those dreams. And it's just mm. I think I have some very mild psychology before I want to hear some sleep dream experiences from y'all. Ooh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. I want them. This is literally the last slide, and this is all that's on it, because a lot of the psychology that I found was not up to snuff. But this seemed to be pretty widely accepted and also weird. When you dream in REM, you're that's your aggressive self, and then when you dream in NREM, that's your friendly self. And you deal with situations in dreams differently. Yeah, depending on what stage you're in. So like and it did say mainly negative. It was reported that it's mostly like negative situations that we put ourselves in. And in NREM, when we're in those situations, we just befriend them. We just Steven Universe the shit out of them, I guess. You have two wolves inside of you. Ooh, recurring dreams are, one, you have something on your mind. Like, it is very, that's like the simple. You have something on your mind. Anyone, even like neurotypical people, can have these recurring dreams because there's just something. And we don't have access to like every aspect of our consciousness, which is so stupid. And so sometimes these things just sort of, and like we saw with the bidirectional, like the ping ponging and the bouncing, you got things that are maybe caught in there. The other thing is, for example, people with Tourette's or OCD, they have parts of their reward system, and I think technically their limbic system, where thoughts just get caught there. Like, for example, like maybe someone with OCD, um, like maybe they shook someone's hand, and even though that person's hand is perfectly clean, their their fears are dominating, and they can't stop thinking about how I need to wash my hand. I need to wash my hand. When am I going to get to wash my hand? Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! My hand feels different. My hand feels weird. My hand feels different. It's more dirty than my other hand. It's asymmetrical. It's weird, and it's like it just keeps going and going. So I think with certain people with certain recurring dreams, it could be something that's utilizing that sort of mechanism, especially since if dreams are using the limbic system and incorporating, you know, emotional aspects to them. I love that, dude. Just like a freezer. Oh my god. No, that dude, that's a real thing because of the dopamine thing. If you stop cold turkey, you get back to this level of depletion, and boom. Yeah, I oh, dude, I can see that. See, because like, and that was a big part of Amy's life. And even though it's been years and years and years since she's been there, those those are probably core memories at this point that it gets kind of wrapped up in the consolidation of more recent memories.
I'll see people I've only met, you know, recently in dreams where I'm on the ship,
Yeah.
which is weird.
That is weird, but then in the dream you're like, it's
Like
normal for this person.
It makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Um that is, yeah, that's definitely why you're dreaming a lot, because this system that I didn't even know existed until I read about this is apparently dopamine plays such a big role in fucking dreams, and it didn't even occur to me that dreams have motivational aspects to them.
Duh.
How did I not know?
Duh.
I know. Oh yeah,
That's why
that'll
I'm
do
always
it.
having that dream
That
of
would trip
seducing
out.
that demon.
What?
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 Amy talks in her sleep. I wanted to find information on sleep talking, which is called somniloquy or something, but there was nothing. And I think that maybe your your body needs to be better at paralyzing your face. I'm just kidding. Yes, dude. I know exactly what Amy's typing. I know exactly what you're typing. Amy has really, yeah, she has crazy, crazy dreams.
Oh
No. Oh no. Yeah, it when you do like wake up very suddenly a lot of the times, and you will either say something or you'll be looking around, but then you'll go back to sleep. On your tea break dreams, you are grabbing the sheets and you're like freaking the fuck out.
Yeah. Or like if I don't wake you up in how I wake up, I like have to wake you up so I can be like, I'm not alone.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
alone.
yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I have such I should have just brought my dream notebook over here. I have one, and because I used to have really weird dreams, but they're mostly normal. Like everything's normal. I remember in high school I had a dream where I was just like at school hanging with my friends. I went to some of my classes, and then school's out, the bell rings, I walk out, and the bus is like this. Like what? What? Yeah, oh my god. Oh my god, that sounds terrible. The night sweats. And it's that damn acetyl fucking choline, man, cuz you when that means that would probably mean that when you're waking up, usually like if you're waking up like a normal person, or like normally you wake up from stage 1 of sleep where your body brings you into it. But if you're waking up like in a sweat, you're probably waking up just like directly from REM sleep, because acetylcholine activates the sweat muscles. So that is crazy. Yeah, I really don't have like the like waking up in a sweat, and I don't have a lot of nightmares. Yeah, whack tea break. I feel like a lot of times that deters people from taking a tea break, because if their dreams or their nightmares are upsetting enough, it's like that's enough to be like, well, I don't want to go through that.
Yeah. Or I'll want to taper off.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to, what is it, titrate? I want to really ease myself into a tea break, because if I stop, it'll be pretty like
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's difficult. It's hard.
Oh yeah. Cause like I want to do a lecture on THC, because a lot of people who smoke report that they don't dream, and I definitely remember having a lot less dreams when I was like stoned all the time. But when I would look at my Fitbit, it's like I'm still obviously I'm still having REM sleep. That would be I think that would be really bad for you if you never ever had any like REM. I would still have it, and I would still have like a decent amount of deep sleep. So it's like, huh, I wonder what is being dysregulated or regulated such that I'm not really dreaming or remembering my dreams. Oh my god. Yeah, that's intense. That is like, wow. I every time people tell me dreams, I'm always trying to like categorize them of if it's like an NREM dream or a REM dream. And it's like the content of like you having like pond water in your mouth and actively even in your waking state like trying to spit it out. It's like I wonder if that would be NREM because you're not as paralyzed. But then like the content of those types of dreams probably wouldn't put pond water in your mouth. Oh my god. Yeah, I could never. I don't think I've ever done lucid dreaming, and I don't know if I'd be able to do it. I feel like recently I had some really fucked up dreams where like, oh, I was in snow and I was looking for Onion. Like he had gotten out and I was like yelling for him and I was freaking out. And I woke up and I for a moment had like this like I was responding like I was still like freaking out, but then like the next second I was like, oh, it's a dream. So luckily like they tend not to bleed into my day if I have stuff like that. You flew? That's so cool. I yeah, I was so avid in my dream notebook and like I had so much more vivid dreams when I was in high school. Like I'll never forget one where I just looked out my window and it was the jungle all of a sudden. And there was like giraffes walking and an elephant and my best friend Caroline was my neighbor and I saw her on her driveway yelling at an elephant and then the elephant sprayed her with water and she was like, "Ah!" and she went inside. That was the best dream ever. That like watching Caroline get sprayed by an elephant I think was just like butthole kiss. But yeah, this was difficult because sometimes neuroanatomy and cognitive science can be a little out of my wheelhouse, but they're actually within the past few years we've made a lot of strides when it comes to like um, the molecular physiology of sleeping and dreaming. Well, that was fun. I I usually have like 40 slides. Oh, this was 12. This is the least amount of slides I've ever used. Um, so, but it was nice, kind of not going super full send and breaking it into just like acetylcholine. That was nice. Um, Gray recommended having prions on the vote for the next lecture. That would be really freaking interesting. And I want to put THC on there too. And I'm not taking ubiquitin off there until I do it. Ubiquitin. It's cool. All right, it's cool. All right. Ah, no, thank you. I love doing this. I love this stuff. I science, science, energy, electrolytes, turbo lights,
Power lights.
more lights than your body has room for. Hell yeah, I appreciate you all so very much. I am excited to see what I will be talking about next time, and it's gonna be lit. Happy Halloween. I love you all. Have a wonderful night.
Have a good night.